once had a neighbor who would leave strange notes on my door and on the wall of our shared driveway. The notes were written in pencil and they made strange references to people I didn't know. A study revealed that nearly 1 in 5 Americans have had a scary encounter with a creepy neighbor. These are often the ones who will watch you through their window, make loud noises at night, or even follow you home. Welcome back. Dark Recaps here. Here are 3 disturbing true stories of neighbors you'd probably rather not want to live next to. Before we continue, if you have a suggestion on how I can improve my content, leave me a comment. Otherwise, consider browsing through some of my other videos on my channel. Let's begin. The creep next door. My family and I live in France. We live in a pretty nice area. The house is newly built. The neighborhood in itself is a new establishment and some houses are still for sale, empty. My dad is a long-haul truck driver, so he is away on trips for most of the time. He would come home for the weekends before he would head off again late Sunday evening. I only have one sibling, a brother who is 29, but he lives in a different city, around 2 hours of a drive from home. Recently, our new neighborhood has been getting more popular, and we noticed some new families moving in every few weeks or so. For a while, it was still quiet around us, with the homes next to us still left for sale. That came to an end when one day we were woken up by a big truck backing up to the house next door. Someone was moving in. The next day, we were heading out to the supermarket, and as we made our way to the car, we were greeted by the man that moved in next door. He looked pretty normal and kind, even bringing us a coffee cake. Me and my mom talked about how it was a little odd that he moved into a 4-bedroom house alone. He said he didn't have any family or relatives either. One time my dad was due to arrive back from his trip in a few days, so we were planning to have a barbecue and spend some time together. The weather was meant to be great that weekend too. My mom decided to invite the neighbor. At first, he was very friendly and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. As time passed, he started to act a little suspicious, which kind of freaked us out a little. He seemed to like me and my mom at the same time. For example, me and my mom loved to go on walks together, taking the dog with us, so we often walked past his home. We caught him staring at us out of the corner of his bedroom window several times. He would go out of his way to meet us as soon as we left or come back home. Whenever my mom or I would leave the house, he would suddenly appear out of nowhere wanting to talk to us. This one time I was leaving the house and he came out asking if my mom is home and if I had any plans that day. I don't know if I mentioned it, but this guy was around 50 and I was 17. He was being a creep. He would make up these BS excuses to come knock on our door, especially when he knew that my dad was away. The most disturbing part was when one day I was coming back from the gym. I was a few feet away from the front door and I heard his door opening. I see him run outside and bring me this cake he had apparently baked for me. By that point, there were so many creepy encounters that we had decided to ignore him. When he came up to me, I noticed how he was getting nervous for some reason, and his next question was just distressing. Out of nowhere, he asked me if I could come inside his home to help him with something in his room. He didn't specify what help he needed, just something. I didn't say anything and ran inside the house, locking the door. I just got freaked out. He had a really creepy smirk on his face that I was disturbed by. When my father got back, my mom had told him about the creep next door. He has stayed away since then. The disturbing old man. We had a scary neighbor a few years ago. He was an elderly man in his late 70s who has since passed away. We think the old man passed away of natural causes. He had no family coming to visit him or anything. Nobody seemed to care about him, and it was obvious that he lived alone. We felt sorry for him, so sometimes my mom and dad would go over to his house to check on him. My mom would bring him food every now and then as well. She really tried her best to be a nice person. He would have this weird attitude sometimes when he'd see me and my brother outside. I felt like he didn't want to see us. He never seemed to appreciate the fact that my parents were just making sure he was okay. Sometimes he would be a very nice, friendly old man, but most of the time I would question his behavior. Maybe he was bipolar, I don't know. For example, I remember one day me and my brother were kicking the ball outside on the street. My mom called us in for food, so we left the ball outside. As we ate, we noticed the man coming out of his home and walking towards the ball. Strangely, he picked up the ball from outside our house and threw it in the trash for no reason. It's not like it was late at night or anything, and we didn't make a lot of noise while playing either. There were a few other minor problems with him too. He would sometimes be looking over at our house to see if we were home, which was a little odd if you ask me. He would sit outside his house for hours just staring at our home. My dad wanted to have a word with him, but my mom would never let him. He was in his senior years and we didn't know if he had any medical conditions or something. So we did our best to ignore his weird behavior. As time passed, he seemed to be getting angrier and sinister. He would not accept the food my mom brought and he would shout at her for no reason. At that point, my mom stopped checking in on him because it was obvious he didn't want anyone inside his home. I remember one night I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up late playing video games. It was around 2 in the morning when I heard someone screaming. It seemed like the screams were coming from the old man's house. They sounded angry too. As I looked out the window, I could see him standing in his living room. He stood near his window with an axe in his hand. He would wave the axe and point it to our house a few times, before walking away and coming back again. It was really disturbing because he seemed to be furious about something. What made it even worse was that he was screaming in another language. I couldn't understand a word he was saying. I told my parents about what I saw that night. They were difficult to convince and hardly believed he was a threat to us because he was barely able to move on his own. Anyway, we ignored him from that point onwards. A few months later, we learned that he had passed, and the house was put up for sale. The Stalker Friend. When I was a teenager, the house across the street had been put up for sale. A new family moved in a couple of months later. I was 15 at the time, and my brother was 12. The new family that had moved in had a son who was around my age, maybe a year or two older. I remember when I first met him, I thought he was a really nice guy, and I thought I could make good friends with him. A few months down the line, I got to know him a little better. The more I hung out with him, the more I noticed that he is a bit on the strange side. He always told me how he could never maintain friends and that nobody seemed to like him. However, at the beginning he seemed to be pretty nice to me and my brother, so I didn't understand why. I felt a little sad for him and wondered if that was truly the case. One day after school, he came over to our house to hang out with me and my brother. We were playing some Xbox and just chilling as any teenagers would do. I had left downstairs to get some food, and as I was coming back, I saw him with his phone in his hand recording my room and my brother playing the Xbox. I asked him what it was for, and he said that he was planning to make a YouTube channel to upload his daily life. I thought it was strange as he never mentioned that idea before, but I let it slide. After this, he seemed to avoid me for a little while, but I didn't really care as he was always a little weird anyway. We didn't communicate for a good month or so. You could say that the friendship was over. But then there was a time where everything about him just turned a little more creepy. That day I had missed the school bus home because I had to stay behind with one of the teachers, so I decided to walk. It took around 45 minutes to an hour to walk home. As I was walking through this park around halfway home, I glanced back to see someone familiar. It looked like the guy across the street, but I wasn't sure since he was a little far away. As soon as I turned my head back, he would look the other way, which I thought was weird. It was obvious that he was trying to avoid me. He was making sure I didn't recognize him. He was quite far away from me, but the outfit he was wearing surely was familiar. It looked like the same jacket as the guys across the street from my house, and I was sure I had seen that hat before. I walked a little faster for about 10 minutes and looked back again. There he was. I could recognize him. It was him indeed. Now I kept thinking to myself, why is he avoiding me, and why did he miss the school bus too? I felt like he was following me. And he was. I got home and told my parents about the situation. They said to never talk to him again and make sure I ignore him. After a few weeks, he would stalk me in random places when I was out with other friends. He would watch me come home from school through his bedroom window, but he would never approach me. I was getting creeped the F out, so my dad went and had a word with his family. Since then, he seems to have stopped, for now anyway. Thank you for watching. What do you think makes a neighbor creepy? Have you had similar encounters in your life? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed your time here. If you did, please consider leaving a like on this video. If you're hungry for more content like this, subscribe to me. Dark Recaps. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.